UN expert Francesca Albanese's new report on Israeli war crimes has once again made her a topic of intense conversation on the internet. Of course, the compromised mainstream media has shown zero interest in sharing the content of her report or providing her a platform to discuss her damning conclusions. That's because, just like she did in March, Francesca has once again exposed the obvious, which is Israeli war crimes against unarmed Palestinian men, women, children, and babies. Francesca Albanese is no pushover. This was evident when an Israeli chap masquerading as a reporter tried to corner her during a recent UN press conference. He was forced to eat a humble pie. These corrupt and compromised media personnel know that they don't stand a chance while dealing with an upright UN official such as Francesca Albanese.
Madam, Mike Wagenheim with I-24 News. It's been a while since we've last spoken. A couple questions for you. In your report, you have a line in here that says that since its establishment, Israel has treated the occupied people as a hated encumbrance and threat to be eradicated, and you go on listing other items. We'll leave aside the contextual and factual debate about that. Based on that statement, it seems to infer that you believe that Israel has been an occupier since the day of its birth. Is that your position? You said since its establishment, Israel has treated occupied people, etc. Are you inferring that Israel's been an occupier since 1948?
Why do you have to infer instead of sticking to what I said?
And I'm asking, is that your position? And you go on. A couple questions for you. In your report, Madam, Mike Wagenheim with I-24 News. It's been a while since we've last spoken. A couple questions for you. In your report, you have a line in here that says that since its establishment, Israel has treated the occupied people as a hated encumbrance and threat to be eradicated, and you go on listing other items. We'll leave aside the contextual and factual debate about that. Based on that statement, it seems to infer that you believe that Israel has been an occupier since the day of its birth. Is that your position? You said since its establishment, Israel has treated occupied people, etc. Are you inferring that Israel's been an occupier since 1948?
Why do you have to infer instead of sticking to what I said? And
I'm asking, that's what's in there.
Let me elaborate.
Okay.
Israel has taken, and I can concede that it has done it with the recognition of the General Assembly, but from a human rights law point of view, and as I take a people-centered approach, I cannot forget it. The creation of the State of Israel has meant the dispossession of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who have been kicked out of their homes and never allowed to return. Why so? And does it make an occupier? It makes a state, it makes of Israel a state who has forcibly displaced a significant part of the native population. And this is the past that has never been addressed. The Palestinians with Israeli citizenship who remained in Israel have been kept for 2 decades under military rule. And this is why when I say an encumbrance, I was not even referring to them, but as you ask, I mean, this is documented, so it's not debatable, it's history. And since 1967, which is what I'm most interested in because of the mandate I have, Israel has continued these practices, has extended the custodianship system that had been used to take control of all the properties left behind by the Palestinian refugees, but without time limit. So from 1967, I think this is Military Order 58, or one of the early military orders, Israel has been able to seize and acquire all the property left behind by the Palestinians. The 350,000 who were forcibly displaced outside the occupied Palestinian territory in 1967, and the hundreds of thousands who have been kicked out of their homes and lands ever since. So there's been a continuity. So it's not just about what has been happening in the occupied Palestinian territory for the past 57 years. It's the fact that, unfortunately, there is a continuity with patterns of conduct that had already been enacted in modern-day Israel.
I'm not sure that answers the question, but it will have to suffice.
Francesca was the first UN expert to tell the world way back in March that Israeli action in Gaza had crossed the threshold of genocide. And yet, both the UN Security Council and the global media remained a mute spectator to the barbaric slaughtering of innocent Palestinians. If anything, they enjoyed the spectacle of Israeli barbarism, carried out with the sponsorship of the US, the UK, the EU, Canada, and Australia, among others. Not many would know that Francesca has been causing tremors in the corridors of power in the West and newsrooms around the world ever since Israel launched its latest genocidal campaign in Gaza on 7th of October last year. She was invited to talk about the Israeli action on the Newsnight program of the BBC, which was presented by Kirsty Walk way back in October last year. I will come to this BBC woman's support for Israel's genocidal campaign in a bit, but let's spend some time in understanding her disgust for humanity and lack of empathy for Palestinians. Watch this clip first.
But as a rapporteur, you're advocating for the Palestinian people. Many Palestinians have absolutely nothing to do with Hamas.
Excuse me. I do not advocate for the Palestinian people. You are wrong. I advocate for the application of international law, human rights, and justice.
So in human rights and justice, do you think that Hamas cares that more than 3,000 children have died, more have been wounded, orphaned, and traumatized? When you're looking at international law, do you agree that Hamas is breaking law?
Excuse me, what question is it? I don't know if Hamas cares or not, but I know that it's Israel's responsibility not to bomb a 360 square kilometer strip of land where the people are besieged. Excuse me, I cannot be in an interview where I've just heard someone saying we are doing everything that we can to avoid civilian loss of life. This is not true because 8,000 people have already been killed. And if the Commissioner General of UNRWA says that 3,500 children, around 3,500 children have been killed, even if it's not fully verified, it means that it's likely, highly likely, because UNRWA has staff members who have been killed. There are journalists who have been killed. 50% of the civilian infrastructure in Gaza has been destroyed. The Palestinians in Gaza have nowhere to go. Please imagine what it is to have 2 million people, 200,000 living in 300 square meters, which is being bombed north to south. Where do these people have to go? There is no safe haven. These people are trapped and are being killed. This is what Israel is pursuing. Read their statement. They read the genocidal logic that is undergoing. And while we speak, there are people and Israeli human rights organizations are asking the world to look at what's happening in the West Bank.
Now, what did you see and observe? Instead of taking note of the UN experts' thoughts on Israeli atrocities, this BBC woman was busy making desperate attempts to project Francesca Albanese, an upright UN expert, as a Hamas sympathizer. This Kirsty Walk woman was asking Francesca Albanese if Hamas cared about the deaths of Palestinian civilians when it was Israel which has slaughtered more than 3,000 children in the very first week of its genocidal campaign. Francesca is not a journalist, but even she was appalled by the absurdity of Kirsty Walk's question. It was around the same time when Kirsty Walk had evoked angry reactions from people on social media with her line of questioning while interviewing the Palestinian ambassador in London. Mind you, Hussam Zomlot had lost at least 6 close members of his family to Israel's genocidal campaign the day he was invited by BBC Newsnight to talk about the situation in Gaza. Watch this clip to truly understand the mindset of this woman called Kirsty Walk. Just see her expression and question when the Palestinian ambassador shares the news of his personal tragedy. How would you react to such a situation, even if you are a most vile individual in the world? And the person who is struck by this tragedy is your sworn enemy. Would your follow-up question be the one that this Kirsty Walk woman asked? That you cannot be condoning the killings of civilians in Israel. That's precisely what she did.
Now, of course, there's more than 800 dead in Gaza, including members of your own extended family. What do you know what happened to them?
They were just sitting at their home and they were simply bombarded. Their entire building was brought down. My cousin, Aya, her 2 children, her husband, her mother-in-law, and 2 other relatives died immediately, were killed instantly. And 2 of her youngest children, a twin, 2 years old, are now in intensive care. This is truly heartbreaking. And the issue here, Kirsty, is that they have no bunkers, they have no Iron Dome, they have nowhere to go. They are simply sitting ducks for the Israeli war machine.
I'm sorry for your own personal loss. I mean, can I just be clear, though? You cannot condone the killing of civilians in Israel, can you? Nor the kidnapped families?
No, we don't condone. And we are very clear, Kirsty. We reject any targeting or harming of civilians from all sides. And you are talking to a Palestinian representative, official, the ambassador, that I represent my government, the PLO, the national movement of Palestine, and we have been committed to this for 30 years, not just today or yesterday, for 30 years. Since the signing of the Oslo Accords, we have committed to non-violence, we have committed to negotiations, as you know.
Yes, and
so this is nothing new. That's why this question, we have done everything in our power to find a different path.
But we have a situation now, as you heard there from Mark, that Hamas may be an empty threat, threatening to kill hostages. Do you condemn that kind of action?
Listen, hostages must be protected and must be made safe and kept safe. Absolutely, this has no discussion whatsoever. We must return the moral high ground, and Israel must immediately cease targeting civilians. And by the way, Kirsty, allow me to say this. This is an Israeli military doctrine. They call it the Iron Dome. Whenever there is such an incident, they go after the civilians to pressure the fighters. So you've heard one of the Israeli
Well, we know there's been a lot of strikes
just 2 minutes ago. He wanted to starve the people in Gaza. He wanted to cut electricity and water. These are war crimes, collective punishment.
In any other civilized country run by the rule of law, this woman and her TV channel would have been reprimanded and even fined. But there were absolutely no consequences for her or the BBC. Now listen to this bit of the same interview to understand the absence of empathy for Palestinian victims and attempt to dehumanize them. When the Palestinian ambassador said how his cousin and their 2 children, aged 4 and 2, were brutally murdered by Israel, even though they had nothing to do with Hamas, see this Newsnight woman's body language, her expression, and a follow-up question that Israeli children too had died. So no big deal.
So there is a possibility that both the UK and the European Commission will cut aid to Palestinians. What's your reaction to that?
That would be very, very counterproductive, and it doesn't serve anything. They will do exactly what is Israel doing. They will do exactly the collective punishment and punishing the people who has nothing to do with this. My cousin is not Hamas. In fact, her husband works for the Palestinian Authority, the opponents of Hamas. These kids, 4 years and 2 years, have nothing to do with Hamas. Everybody, including these silly ideas in the world, are punishing the people that have nothing to do with this.
And we know that children that are young are also have died in Israel. So In your view, is this a contained but appalling conflict between Hamas and Israel? Or do you think Hamas want to widen the conflagration?
No, it's Israel now that wants to widen
but
the scope. It's Israel
But
that wants to
Hamas
widen
might
the
want
scope.
this whole area to be destabilized.
Well, Hamas is a militant group. We are the government. Israel has a government. There is the international community. The first and the foremost important priority now is just to stop this madness, the atrocities immediately, and to learn the lessons.
So, where does this lead?
BBC has always gone overboard in highlighting the human stories during the Ukraine conflict. Have you heard or watched any such human stories coming from Gaza? I know for a fact that BBC has access to every single journalist still alive and working from across Gaza. If the BBC wants, it can use their services to highlight their sufferings through individual stories. But do you hear or watch them? No. Why? Because the BBC simply doesn't want it, as the corporation has been taken over by Zionists. So instead of pausing and reflecting on what had just happened to her guest, this Kirsty Walk woman was leaving no stone unturned in making light of both the ambassador's personal tragedy and the wider sufferings of Palestinians at the hands of a genocidal regime called Israel. While the BBC kept on inviting the Palestinian ambassador since then, it never invited Francesca Albanese again after that disastrous interview in October 2023. This is something Francesca Albanese herself highlighted in a tweet moments ago. This compromised media outlet clearly knows that Francesca is not one of those who can allow the presenters working for the BBC to carry out their pro-Israel propaganda with impunity. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and our journalism on buymecoffee.com and Patreon. If you too think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.